Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. My name is Caitlin Saladino. I'm the Director of Strategic Development here at Brookings Mountain West. And on behalf of my colleagues, Ashley LeClaire, Bill Brown, our Executive Director, Dave DeMoore, and our entire team of student researchers, I want to thank you for coming out as part of our Spring 2024 Brookings Scholar Lecture Series here at UNLV. I want to also take a moment to acknowledge our donors. Their support allows us to do this work and put on these events that you're all attending tonight. So we're very happy to have all of their support over these years. And of course, I want to acknowledge our team in the back of the room that many of you probably saw as you were walking in. Our student team and professional staff here at UNLV with UNLV TV is helping to record this lecture. All of the lecture notes that you're going to see tonight, the slides, as well as the recording that we are in progress of doing right now, will be available on our website in just a few short days, so you can, of course, share that with your colleagues and your friends. This week, we've had the pleasure of welcoming our colleague Lauren Bauer to Brookings Mountain West for the very first time. Lauren is also our first scholar from the Brookings Institution who is affiliated with the Hamilton Project. The Hamilton Project is a Brookings Center focused on economic growth and broad participation in that growth, enhancing individual economic security, and embracing a role for effective government in making much needed public investments. And obviously that mission resonates so much with our region here in Southern Nevada. Like all of our scholars, Lauren's been meeting with UNLV faculty, community members, teaching in classes, and of course meeting with administration here at the university to learn a little bit more about our community on her first visit. And before I turn things over to Lauren, I want to share a little bit about her background with you. Lauren Bauer is a fellow in economic studies at the Brookings Institution and the associate director of the Hamilton Project. Her research focuses on social and safety net policies, particularly on federal nutrition assistance programs, education, the labor market, and the economic security of women and children. Bauer is a member of the New York City Office of Community Schools Research Advisory Council and the Government Affairs and Public Policy Committee of Mazon, a Jewish response to hunger. She has served in research positions with political campaigns and as a special assistant to the Office of the Secretary at the U.S. Department of Education. She holds a bachelor's in history and a master's and PhD in human development and social policy with a certificate in education sciences, all from Northwestern University. Tonight, Lauren will actually be presenting brand new research that no one else has seen. We are the first audience for this work, and so we're really excited for what she will be teaching us, as well as the dialogue that will follow. If you have questions, please reserve them for the end. I'll run around with the microphone to ensure you're captured for our recording. Otherwise, without further ado, if you would help me in welcoming up Lauren Bauer.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Great. Thank you so much for having me here for Brookings. My introduction to Brookings Mountain West has been amazing. And I am so excited, as Caitlin said, to preview some new work for you. And to that end, with regard to the bringing of the microphones around and questions, we do have enough time before publication to make edits. And so if you really are not feeling something or you feel like I've missed something, I truly welcome that feedback because I'll just get to my computer and start writing new paragraphs. And as I said, this lecture is based on a forthcoming paper that I've co-authored with Bradley Hardy of Georgetown University and my research assistant, Olivia Howard, at the Hamilton Project. And we'll be releasing it next month. So to that end, I'm reading, because this is fresh. All right, so during the debt ceiling debates last spring, then Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, described who he thinks should be subject to more stringent work requirements to participate in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. He said, quote, "In this family, we may have a child that is able-bodied, not married, no kids, but he's sitting on the couch collecting welfare. We're going to put work requirements on that individual." In other words, picture this: a man in the prime of his life who does not work, does play video games all day. He didn't say that explicitly, but it was implicit. Lives with his parents and isn't trying to form his own family. Quite the opposite of the American dreamer, a healthy single man self-sufficiently pulling himself up by his bootstraps. Today, I'm going to introduce you to ABAWDs, and I'm keeping that slide up there for most of this presentation just to keep you oriented. Able-bodied adults without dependence. Able-bodied means that a person is healthy enough to work enough to make ends meet. Without dependence means they don't have children. About 8.2% of the population are low-income ABAWDs. In the course of this lecture, I will describe why able-bodied is a misnomer that masks health issues, why without dependence obscures more complicated family dynamics. I will talk about the interactions of ABAWDs with the labor market, and I will dive into more detail about the anti-poverty power of the safety net and who it leaves behind. And I will share some policy options to support low-income working-age adults. I hope to convince you that ABAWDs are not the basement dweller, unworthy of help, nor are ABAWDs the bootstrapper in no need of it. The stakes for proactively addressing ABAWDs' economic security are high. Given the structure of our market economy, individuals will face exposure to changing economic conditions. Demand for some occupations and tasks will grow, while others will be in decline, leading to individual and economy-wide shifts that affect earnings and employment. The safety net can offer valuable protection amid these shocks, if it's on offer. The majority of those who face restricted or significantly limited access to these protections are ABAWDs. The social insurance system in the United States, implemented by federal, state, and local government agencies, provides protection against what President Franklin Delano Roosevelt called the vicissitudes of life: disability, the loss of earnings in old age, being laid off, and other setbacks. The social insurance system also provides support to help people meet their basic needs and gain the skills and services they need to enter and succeed in the workforce. Nearly everyone in the US, despite what I just said, directly benefits from the social insurance system at some point in their lives. Moreover, everyone indirectly benefits from it, either from knowing the system would be there for them or their family during some unexpected hardship, or simply because it helps to support the overall economy. There's no uniformly agreed upon definition of social insurance, but two definitions, one narrower and one broader, are often used. Under the narrower definition, social insurance consists of government programs in which workers and/or their employers pay dedicated taxes to the programs during the years that the workers are employed. The workers then qualify for benefits from the programs when they reach retirement age, are determined to have a disability, are laid off, or experience another qualifying event. The main social insurance programs under this definition are the Social Security programs, Medicare, and unemployment insurance. The broader definition of social insurance includes both programs supported by dedicated taxes and other programs, including tax credits, that provide income support, help people secure or afford necessities, such as food, housing, and healthcare coverage, or provide services and benefits to improve economic opportunity, such as education, job training, and childcare. And I will note this last point is a little controversial, but I really believe that education is part of the social insurance system, and I wrote it so I can say it. Across the OECD nations, welfare states define and codify who should receive social insurance and the manner in which a government should intervene. Concepts of deservingness have influenced the design of social welfare programs since the English Poor Laws, which created distinct categories for receipt of assistance and generally mandated work participation while enacting rules to restrict dependency. Debates over deservingness under the Poor Laws, and this is like hundreds of years ago, centered on able-bodied male laborers. And the deterioration of the safety net in England in the early 1800s came at such workers' expense. The imprimatur of deservingness might seem static to the casual observer, but it's not. For example, the Social Security Act of 1935 under FDR's New Deal and Medicare and Medicaid under President Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society program are recent explicit examples of a US welfare state and of how existing programs can change, open up new doors, and be introduced to bolster the safety net. So with Social Security, we start with people over the age 65, and then eligibility expanded to widows, surviving dependents, and people with disabilities. It also expanded provide benefits for farm laborers and domestic workers later, because after decades of exclusion of workers in these, at the time disproportionately Black industries. So these are instances that provide examples of policymakers altering, if incrementally, the US definition of deservingness in accordance with changing social mores. For the most part today, social insurance programs explicitly target or otherwise prioritize delivery to children, adults with custody or direct responsibility for children, senior citizens, and those with disabilities. As a result of this targeting, the reduction in poverty for these groups can be substantial. So like the long bars. And as you can see, though, the safety net does not reduce poverty uniformly. In fact, there is a population notably ill-served by the safety net: low-income working-age adults without dependents or government disabilities, AKA ABAWDs. We find there is precious little poverty reduction for ABAWDs, who are defined here, this 18 to 64, with no SSI or SS and no children. Approximately 14.4% of these ABAWDs were in poverty in 2017. Poverty among this group was reduced by 1.1 percentage points to 13.3% after accounting for taxes and transfers. The safety net for working age adults has been broken for a long time, even as the safety net has strengthened for others. From 1993 to 2017, the total reduction in poverty for all groups increased from 6.9 to 11.9 percentage points. For ABAWDs, the safety net went from reducing poverty by 0.8 percentage points in 1993 to 1.1 in 2017. Effectively no change in poverty reduction in the past 25 years. All right, back to remembering who ABAWDs are. While stark, this shouldn't be surprising. Those who do not have access to the safety net do not see its benefits. Some states have not extended access to Medicaid to adults 19 to 64 with incomes below 138% of the federal poverty level. ABAWDs can only receive SNAP for 3 months out of 36 if they fail to meet a work requirement. ABAWDs are eligible for many housing assistance programs, but they are at the back of the line, and the line is long. The value of the earned income tax credit for this population is very small, and state-level general assistance is either non-existent or paltry. So let's go back to the Speaker McCarthy quote, which I just love reading. In this family, we may have a child that is able-bodied, and let's just be clear, child is an adult, right? Is able-bodied, not married, no kids, but he's sitting on the couch collecting welfare. We're gonna put work requirements on that individual. So for the rest of the talk, we're gonna take this apart. We're gonna do able-bodied, we're gonna do without dependents, and then we're gonna talk about sitting on the couch not working. And I'll note again that this is the keynote version of the research, and for all, there's about 15 more figures and lots more policy ideas that I'm gonna be able to get to, and even more stuff on like welfare queens and the war on drugs and how to help people with criminal records that I can't get to here. So you'll have to pick up the paper next month. Have to, just have to. All right, so let's start with able-bodied. What does it mean to be able-bodied? The government's verification of a person's disability is not done in a vacuum. In each program where disability status is assessed, work is a component of the determination. An able-bodied person is someone who is physically and mentally able to work. Health is co-determined with work readiness. Disability benefits like I always say SSDI, so like reading it out is just hard. Social, security, disability, insurance are provided monthly to former workers who have been determined on the basis of health to be able to work either not at all or in a limited fashion. Supplemental security income is awarded to those who prove that they have a medically determined disability that prevents them from doing, quote, substantial gainful activity, i.e., because of their health, they cannot work enough to earn more than about $1,500 per month. So it's operationalized that way. In SNAP, receiving SSI or SSDI is the first way in which a participant's disability status is determined. But one can also prove that one's health limits one's capacity to work via SNAP-specific processes that vary across states. Therefore, the designation able-bodied is arrived at through a process of elimination. If one does not prove that they meet the criteria for receiving SSI or SSDI and are not determined to have a work-limiting health problem through another program, then a person is able-bodied. In practice, the process through which disabilities are officially determined has well-documented faults and cracks and can leave those with work-limiting health challenges in the ABAWD population. And in fact, this is what we find. If the government were to properly classify the ABAWD population through fidelity to its rules and regulations, then no one who is an ABAWD should have a work-limiting disability. In fact, nearly a third of ABAWDs living under 200% of the federal poverty level report having a disability. So this is ABAWDs. So we've already jumped through the hoops. We're only talking about ABAWDs now. So a third have a disability, and a quarter report that their disability affects their ability to work. So they are all technically able-bodied. One reason for lower point-in-time employment among low-income ABAWDs is their poor health. Half of low-income ABAWDs who never entered the labor force in 2021 self-reported disability. 39% of whom claimed their disability affected their attempts to work, like they wanted to try, they couldn't. Even among ABAWDs who were employed for every month in 2021, a quarter reported a disability, 10% of whom report that their disability impacts their ability to work, like the number of hours they can work or the types of jobs that they can take. Among SNAP participants who are ABAWDs and labor force non-participants, 80% report that health challenges are the reason why. In short, we find that many ABAWDs who, by definition, do not have a government-determined disability still struggle with their health, and in ways that are consequential to their lives. Almost half self-reported disability, and among them, half report that these health problems affect their ability to work. What could be done to support such low-income ABAWDs? I'll offer two policy options here. So, while those who receive disability benefits are categorically excluded from the ABAWD population, states have the option to use other information, such as a doctor's note or the determination by an agency-employed eligibility specialist, to exempt those in poor health from various work requirements. States should use these flexibilities to allow more low-income people in poor health to maintain access to benefits. Given the centrality of good health and health care to well-being and the ability to work, it is notable that one area of recent progress in the safety net for low-income ABAWDs is health insurance. The Affordable Care Act extended Medicaid eligibility to most adults with incomes below 138% FPL and provided subsidies to those with incomes between 138 and 400% FPL to purchase insurance on the exchange. Since the Supreme Court made the ACA's Medicaid expansion a state option, good job, 40 states and DC have adopted it. As a result, tens of millions more Americans have health insurance. Reviews of the hundreds of studies of Medicaid expansion show positive effects on outcomes like insurance coverage, care utilization, self-reported health, and even economic indicators like reduced mortgage delinquency. We, me, Bradley, Olivia, support continued Medicaid expansion, but not in conjunction with the imposition of Medicaid work requirements, as is happening right now in Georgia. The Department of Health and Human Services projects that imposing a work requirement for participation in Medicaid would cause 21 million people to lose their health insurance without dependents. Okay. Feeling good? You good? Okay. I'm good too. Great. Thanks for asking. Okay. So another reason for serious reconsideration of ABAWD access to the safety net is the rapid change occurring with respect to the typical American family. While the traditional nuclear married family structure has largely maintained for college-educated parents, there are significant shifts in how America's families overall are organized. Overall, ABAWDs may have fewer observable commitments in that they're less likely to own their own homes or to have custodial responsibility for children. But standard models of economic behavior posit that individuals can engage in consumption smoothing, borrowing during lean times, and saving during periods of individual earnings growth. However, markets have imperfections, and in the absence of access to traditional credit markets or private and familial supports, the current configuration of safety net benefits provides relatively few transfer benefits for ABAWDs. As a consequence, they, and particularly ABAWDs not living with a spouse, may lack the potential insurance associated with the presence of another adult who may be able to provide real-time economic supports. ABAWDs may be themselves more economically vulnerable because of these dynamics. Another trend affecting the family is the decades-long decline in the average number of siblings and overall family size within the US across race and educational attainment. Amid the demographic shift toward fewer children, for several decades there has been a rise in complex family structures, wherein children do not share either the biological mother or father of their siblings. Combined with these trends, we also observe an increasing share of families with parents in non-marital relationships and partnerships. In other words, it is more likely now that the government could assume an ABAWD doesn't have a family, the guy in the basement, when in reality, the ABAWD is just part of a larger complex family structure across multiple households. Notably, ABAWDs may be without dependents, but they are not necessarily childless. Among ABAWDs living under 200% of the federal poverty line, 40% are parents. Approximately 5% of them are non-custodial parents to a minor child. I accept the premise that the nation's safety net should protect the economic security of children. I am often in the business of promoting that premise. Children do not choose their parents or their economic circumstances. Children are protected in part because they represent the future workforce and to promote greater equality of opportunity. Many reports on poverty and human development argue that more investment is necessary for children growing up in adverse economic, neighborhood, and developmental environments. Parental economic status looms large as a strong predictor of subsequent adult outcomes. There is a lag in adapting access to safety net benefits to absorb a broader cross-section of people caring for children who fall outside traditional family and caregiver definitions. Household finances are affected by changing family structure, and social insurance programs should adjust accordingly. The economic circumstances of non-custodial and most likely non-resident parents affects children, for better or for worse. While the model of public assistance delivery holds non-custodial parents accountable as contributors to the financial security of their household, there are few transfer benefits available that go to these parents, many of whom look broadly similar on observable characteristics to the custodial parents, like by education or occupation or earnings. Custodial parents struggling in the face of economic security likely have partners in raising this child who face the same struggles. The struggles of one parent are not walled off from the family unit with the dependent child. They can spill over. Changing family structure means that without dependents may be inadequate for identifying parents and non-parents in a child-centered approach. Family structure complexity shows that many children rely on a broader network of family members and adults for economic protection, including non-custodial parents. The challenges derived from the weakest link within an extended familial or social network can exert financial, emotional, and time pressure on well-intentioned adults and families who attempt to provide support. Social program policies that exclude ABAWDs can inadvertently place more economic pressure on members of their familial and social network who are more likely themselves to face various forms of economic instability. Such complexities have been examined extensively in the context of non-custodial fathers, the economic challenges many of these fathers face, and how these challenges affect their children, including but not limited to the collection of child support payments. Dynamic economies and the social and demographic shifts occurring within them require that policymakers remain nimble. This includes how families are defined, what units of support might be, and then establishing the parameters that allow for public supports to engage in a new way. A reappraisal is in order, not just regarding ABAWDs themselves, but ABAWDs in the context of their families and as parents and caregivers. Okay. So we've done able-bodied, we've done out without dependence. And I hope I've disabused you of the notion that ABAWDs are all very healthy and living the single life in a basement. Now, let's pretend you didn't just hear everything that I told you. Let's pretend that they are, as I said, perfectly healthy and have no responsibilities. The implication of that, being able-bodied, not having dependents, is that an ABAWD is in a position to take care of themselves. They don't need to take care of anyone else. They just have to take care of themselves. They are self-sufficient. This raises the question of how self-sufficiency is defined. Is self-sufficiency a binary concept? Are you or are you not? Is it viewed as static or dynamic, i.e., do workers face changing economic circumstances all the time? But most importantly, can one be fully in control of their own self-sufficiency? i.e., in this context, can anyone who wants to work find a job or multiple jobs with enough hours and high enough wages to make ends meet? The final piece of tonight's puzzle is work. We provide evidence that a safety net that predicates its inaccessibility to ABAWDs on the grounds of self-sufficiency through work does not recognize the state of the low-wage labor market and the precarious position of its workers. What is clear about this population is that being a worker is not enough. To be sure, most ABAWDs are in the labor force at any given point in time. About half of low-income ABAWDs were employed in March of 2023. 6% were seeking work, i.e. they were unemployed, and the remaining 45% were out of the labor force. ABAWDs report a variety of reasons for labor force non-participation. 11% are students, 12% disabled, and 8% are retired. Another common reason people give for not being in the labor force is caregiving. About 1% of ABAWDs are not in the labor force and report no desire to work. Our basement dwellers, there aren't that many. Right, so 1% of 8%, you can see how, there aren't that many. Maybe people are lying on the surveys, but I really don't think so. Anyway, but hold those numbers in your head for a second because they're super misleading. So you're gonna hold them and then you're gonna let them leave. Because what I wanna focus on is a particular aspect of the low-wage labor market, volatility. The drivers of income and earnings volatility include a range of factors: getting a job, leaving or losing a job, variation in hours worked, which feed into earned income. While one worker may work continuously on a year-to-year basis, but with variability in their hours on a weekly or monthly basis, another worker may work on a less consistent basis over the course of a year. Some workers may face volatility both from intermittent hours and work participation overall. That snapshot I just told you about understates how many ABAWDs are workers. Remember, we're talking about volatility, in and out, and in and out, in and out. When I looked over a 2-year time horizon in prior work, 75% of ABAWDs who report participating SNAP are in the labor force, right? So we were at 55 before, now we're at 75. John Coglianese calls such workers in and outs. Get it? Volatility, churn, in and out. They take short breaks between jobs, return to the labor force fairly quickly, like within 6 months, and crucially, are no more likely than a typical worker to take another break. And remember the reasons that ABAWDs gave in the prior misleading static, your health, being a student, caregiving. These are not necessarily permanent states. Lives are complicated and they change. And these changes affect people's ability to work. So that's employment status changes, but work hours are volatile too. Work schedule instability, wherein employers adjust hours for employees on a daily or weekly basis to optimize firm output, also drive overall differences in income volatility across the income distribution. Workers with lower wages are exposed to higher volatility in their work hours. For some workers, opportunities to engage in contingent work may serve to fill in earnings gaps, while for others, this form of employment introduces more precarity into their overall earning streams. When assessing the economic status of ABAWDs, it is useful to consider how economic volatility affects both the individuals who work under such conditions, as well as any connected family members or non-custodial children they interact with. The evidence on the incidence of volatility further reinforces the overarching point that ABAWDs could benefit from a more robust set of economic buffers and protections, namely social insurance. Social insurance smooths. These benefits could have positive spillovers for individuals and families that are connected to, and in some instances, reliant upon these adults. Within our market-based system, earnings are the focal mechanism by which families create and maintain economic security. There is consistent evidence that the nation's safety net transfer programs and refundable tax credits collectively reduce the risk borne by families from earnings volatility in the labor market. Any assessment of economic conditions and the consequences of volatility for ABAWDs must grapple with their limited access to the tax and transfer system, social insurance. For low-income ABAWDs who work, the safety net does not meaningfully reward their work through the earned income tax credit. It limits their access to unemployment insurance when they lose their jobs, and it imposes work requirements that punitively harm low-income workers trying to gain a toehold. Unemployment insurance eligibility requirements leave many working adults out, given that many low-wage workers package their incomes together with multiple part-time employment arrangements, many of which are not covered by traditional UI. While access to UI is a function of employment characteristics that low-income ABAWD population disproportionately fails to meet, there are specific to ABAWD restrictions for the EITC, SNAP, and Medicaid. One of the largest and most successful anti-poverty programs in general, not for these guys, is the refundable earned income tax credit. The EITC is a tax break for workers with low or moderate income and is meant to reward their work effort. ABAWDs benefit little from the EITC, however. The level of benefits provided is directly connected both to the presence of dependent children as well as the level of earned income. Some of the well-documented benefits of the EITC, including improvements in educational outcomes, lower poverty, reduced racial inequality, do not apply to ABAWDs. The EITC reduces the share of ABAWDs in poverty by 1%. While it is estimated that more than 5 million low-income ABAWDs are taxed further into poverty by federal payroll and income taxes. In 2021, the American Rescue Plan tripled the maximum EITC for this population and saw a tripling of its anti-poverty effects. Furthermore, An experimental demonstration project of the effects of expanding the EITC to this population found that it increased labor market earnings and employment. Given the evidence on the employment effects of the EITC and labor market-driven income instability, enhancing the generosity of the EITC for this population merits consideration. In order for ABAWDs to maintain access to SNAP and to Medicaid in Georgia, they must meet a monthly work requirement. In short, those who are subject to a work requirement have to prove that they are working or participating in an eligible training program for at least 80 hours each month in order to maintain access. There is abundant research evidence that SNAP lowers poverty, reduces food insecurity, and supports work. Evidence suggests that SNAP work requirements do not increase work, but they do reduce program participation. And while there has not been a formal evaluation in Georgia on Medicaid, enrollment has been far lower than predicted. The hard threshold on compliance with work requirements, 80 hours per month for ABAWDs in qualifying activities, with job search not counting, does not account for the instability in work hours I just addressed and harms workers trying to get back on their feet after job loss. New flexibility around what could constitute sufficient work effort and making searching for work an allowable activity are examples of policies that would allow SNAP to serve as a better work support for those in the low-wage labor market. Furthermore, SNAP recipients can meet the work requirements by participating in their state's E&T program. However, there is no requirement for states to provide enough slots in their programs for all interested participants. Most states only operate E&T in parts of the state or provide less than 20 hours a week in services. In practice, this means that many ABAWDs who try to meet the work requirement are unable to because they can't access this program. States differ in how they structure their programs, what types of training and services are offered, how accessible they make them, and how many slots are available. A handful of states require participation in E&T for ABAWDs to meet the work requirement, this mandatory E&T. If there's mandatory E&T, then there must be an E&T slot made available to a participant. But failure to comply in the first month in a mandatory E&T state means you're kicked off the program. This optional policy route, which some states have started to adopt as a way to reduce the roles and make it easier for them to administer work requirements by not actually having to do it, results in individuals just losing their benefits. I would also note that work requirements can be a drag on the economy as a whole. Work requirements can impede the recovery from recession by dampening SNAP's countercyclical features. When the economy contracts, there is an increased demand for safety net programs amid higher levels of job loss. Denying benefits to ABAWDs who lost their jobs or who cannot find work after 3 months during a recession can contribute to these individuals spiraling downward. SNAP work requirements also make it harder for local economies with distressed labor markets to recover if work requirement waivers are not in effect. Waivers are crucial to allow SNAP to stimulate and stabilize labor markets when there's evidence there are not sufficient jobs. This is especially true because low-income workers, who are more likely to be eligible for SNAP, are hit particularly hard during economic downturns, and thus are likely to face challenges both maintaining consumption and finding new employment. Reforms that automatically suspend work requirements when economic conditions warrant, which Congress actually has done in the last 2 recessions, so yay for them, could be codified. In conclusion, there are millions of Americans who are in poor health, are part of a family, and who work in the low-wage labor market who either cannot access or struggle to gain and maintain access to the safety net. Changing social norms, economic conditions, and demographics render static policies and laws regarding ABAWDs unresponsive to the needs of many individuals, families, and their communities. Given the compendium of evidence on the long-run benefits of access to higher levels of income, as well as the more specific benefits from access to the safety net, group level restrictions, on the provision of support have the potential to worsen economic outcomes for children, adults, and families. Even as a more sophisticated understanding of the challenging work and life dynamics facing ABAWDs has emerged, an outdated understanding of the labor market and stereotypical assumptions about ABAWDs remain pervasively enshrined in law and, as we've noted repeatedly, pervasively a part of the policy conversation. This mischaracterization of members of this highly diverse group, did I even say that half are women? Half are women, half are women, great. I knew I cut too much, I'm so sorry, guys. All right, the mischaracterization of members of this highly diverse group leads to outdated and imprecise policymaking. This starts with the safety net. Low-income ABAWDs have very little access to these programs. Intervening with a more robust safety net for ABAWDs can be viewed as an effort to disrupt the intergenerational transmission of economic disadvantage and provide stability. Spells of economic insecurity among this group are met with an inadequate response from an income support system ill-positioned to absorb them in times of need. The uncertainty facing many working individuals and family include the effects of technological change and automation, which can reshape the labor market in ways that may expose individuals and families, including ABAWDs, to greater short-term risk. Individual budget pressure from rising housing costs only add to these strains. Extending greater safety net protections to ABAWDs can help these adults adapt and respond to changing economic conditions. Such assistance could have positive spillovers for their families, networks, and communities. In short, we show in the paper that is coming out next month at the Brookings Institution, you can sign up for the event in like 2 weeks. ABAWDs are misunderstood, but they are worthy of support. A safety net that does not support low-income working-age Americans without dependents or a government-determined disability does not perform adequately. The end.
Questions?
Yeah, I may have missed it, but can you detail the demographics of this group, both in terms of those employed, those circulating in and out of employment, and other aspects of their demographics?
Sure.
Age, race.
Yeah, so this is all in the broader paper. We do a pretty comprehensive demography of this, but I did throw it up. So I said about half are women. None of this should be wild. That, I think, does surprise people because this stereotype looms so large in the conversation about who this population is. So I said half are women, a third are parents, or 40% are parents. They are actually sort of broadly speaking, they come from everywhere in terms of sort of race, ethnicity. They're more likely to have lower levels of education. I don't know I asked my research assistant to pull like who the modal ABAWD is, and she's doing it right now, like literally we're writing right now. So she's doing it right now, but if I had to guess, it would be a woman in her early 50s.
What about geography?
We didn't do geography.
Now, when you say a woman in her early 50s, are you talking about those?
Are you talking about all of those in the population, or are you talking about those who might need some safety net support?
Right, so we've done this, we've limited a lot of our analysis to to low-income ABAWDs.
No, because, AWODs, most of them, I suppose, are working. Many of them are attending college, whatever.
Right, so this is low-income.
So you're looking
AWODs.
at the low-income AWODs. Mm-hmm. Okay. That wasn't clear, in terms of your...
sorry, yeah, so when I said, every time I said under 200% of the federal poverty level,
now,
that is our definition of low income.
I don't know if there's somebody else, but I have a follow-up question about homelessness and how the lack of support for the group you're focusing on contributes to homelessness.
Yes, so that is another thing that I cut that will be in the main paper. But there has been an increase. So this observation about sort of what we are doing, what is happening right now with sheltered and unsheltered homelessness, it's following many of the trends that I described here. The level of unsheltered families, unhoused, is going down. So we're solving that problem, and individuals being unsheltered is going up. And so you're sort of seeing no change, but if you pull it apart, then you're seeing the same sort of bifurcation that we've described here, where we are seeing more progress among a population that we are specifically targeting, and less or worsening problems among this group. Is that responsive to your question?
I think so.
Okay.
Thank you. Question I had was, I'm not surprised the U.S. doesn't do well here, but are there countries that where you see much better policy and much better outcomes?
So there are 2 other papers that will be released at the Hamilton Project at Brookings event in the middle of April. And one of them is by a group of scholars who specialize in the European Union. And what they do is basically make the argument that in the European context, they actually take care of these people a little bit better. And they point out ways in which that is the case and why it doesn't seem to have the negative effects. The arguments against doing stuff like this are it's expensive, we don't really need to do it, it's gonna create a culture of dependency, people aren't gonna wanna work anymore if they know the money is coming in. And so that essay argues that that's not really the case, at least in the European context.
Okay, so I'll do a twofold question too. So did you guys do any examination on like mental health as like some of the health barriers?
Yeah, so I don't know it off the top of my head, but we did look, maybe I do, I think it was 20. So we aggregated physical and mental health into our self-reported disability, but then we obviously looked at them separately. And I think 20% said that it was a mental health challenge that made it harder for them to work. Something, don't tape, do not quote me on that. But it is something that we measure or try to measure and incorporate into the fuller analysis, and it is consequential.
Yeah, it seems like that's affecting the younger ABAWDs a lot more, you know. But second question is, did you examine maybe potential business interjections where they could maybe be incentivized to grab some of these ABAWDs that aren't working? Like if you've been long-term unemployed, we'll give you the business an incentive.
And this is probably relevant to you. One thing we don't talk about here is workforce development, because actually that sort of whole ecosystem is meant to help them. So we set it aside instead of setting that aside. And to talk about the social insurance programs where they don't have access. But I think that would fall under there, but that's actually probably a pretty good point for the paper, to make sure we acknowledge that we're not talking about the workforce development system.
There's a program in New Jersey that the government will give the business and the employer that have been.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in there for connection. I think the piece that we really wanted to hammer home is volatility and smoothing. That even if you were to make a connection, what kinds of jobs are available in the low-wage labor market, just have these features. And you can't have an employer, not just stop doing SNAP scheduling because it's bad for, you know what I mean? I think there's some limits to what we can expect a firm to do in order to solve these problems, which is why we want government intervention. Yeah.
Thank you very much for a very nuanced presentation. I looked originally and I thought, my goodness, this group is not a very sympathetic group. And you made it sympathetic.
Thank you.
So now,
that was exactly why I wanted to write this.
Now I'm a budding politician. And I'm on your side. Tell me what's my best argument for taking taxes from people who are struggling to help this group so that I win the election?
Well, that is not my forte. I mean, I think, where I started with is this concept of deservingness. And what I tried to parcel was two things. One is they're more sympathetic than you think, which is what you glommed onto. But then the labor market piece is, even if they're not sympathetic at all, it is rough out there. And like, if we are, trying to, and these are macro problems too, like they could be a drag. So why are we doing this? So yes, we've got this sympathetic portion. I want to make them more sympathetic to you, but I also just want to acknowledge what's happening in the labor market and the fact that we have these programs that are effective for the people who can access them, that could help this population too. And as your colleague friend, I don't know, the person you are sitting with pointed out, many of them don't need it. Like, we're talking about low-income ABAWDs. Like, when I was 25, I was an ABAWD, right? Like, there are a lot of ABAWDs in this group who don't need these things. But if they do, we are, by rule, really restricting them because of these demographic characteristics. We are saying, you don't get this because you're able-bodied, you don't have a dependent. And that seems like something that is worth reconsidering.
Thanks, Lauren. I'm wondering, have you considered the gig economy at all in a metro that has large unemployment? Does the gig economy help these people by giving them some kind of part-time work, or does it just trap them in the cycle that they're in?
So what I said in the sentence, I'll repeat here, both. Right? Like, that is a form of smoothing. And it certainly, I've been joking with everyone. I love talking to my Lyft drivers. I learn a lot about the world for why are they choosing to do it? How much they're getting out of it? What is the bad part about it? Wouldn't they love to take a day of vacation? Oh, wait, they can't, right? So I think it does help with the smoothing piece in principle, but, bad jobs are bad jobs.
Hi.
Hi.
There's so many things I want to touch on. I'm going to try my best to ask the best question. So I think that this issue overlaps with so many other economic issues that we're faced with in our country. And one is obviously the labor force and labor regulations and everything, and unionization. Because as we were talking about the volatility of work and how, I was thinking about Walmart, for example, and how some employers kind of use scheduling as a weapon against their employees, and they specifically under-schedule them. Mm-hmm. 'Cause I remember when I was working, I would get scheduled just under enough to get a break. Mm-hmm. And I'd be like, why did you do that? And so it's something that many of us have experienced, and or just, they'll schedule you just enough right before you qualify for benefits, but just under, so they don't have to pay you. Mm-hmm. While the Walton family is one of the richest families in the United States, but their company has the highest percentage of employees on welfare. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm just thinking about that and the labor. So, people wouldn't need social insurance if they actually, less people would need these things if they actually had access to a secure work schedule with worker protections. And so I was just wondering your thoughts on that. And then I'll ask a follow-up question.
Oh boy, okay. I'm scared but excited. So on the first part, I think that's the fundamental issue. You can't just supply as much labor as you want. Oh boy, no, this is on tape, so I really shouldn't. But I think that's sort of the fundamental point is you can want to work as much as you want and try to, but there's only so much control you have over that. And where the rubber meets the road here, and I do a lot of work on work requirements, is what you just described not only affects your own income. Let's say your employer scheduled you for 78 hours a month. and you need to prove 80. What are you gonna do? You better hope that you've got all your paperwork, you can convince the state that you should have a hardship exemption that month, and that they have a hardship exemption available to you that month to exempt you from work requirements. Right? So it's all of that. Like that's the complexity here is that it's control, right?
And
But
then
it's a very good insight.
my follow-up question is, because you were bringing up the EU and that other paper,
Yes.
and how they don't, experience these problems that that a certain narrative here talks about. Some countries in the EU are also experimenting with like a constitutional right to work, where like a federal jobs guarantee, where anyone who wants to work should be able to work. And so I was just wondering your thoughts on that. Like, is it the government's responsibility to make sure you have access to an income through a job? Because that's like another labor question I'm interested in.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, generally, that's probably not where I'm more of an incrementalist, put it that way. And very practical. That is like the Hamilton Project at Brookings is as practical as you could possibly be. And so my approaches are much more small, but I do think we are approaching the world where people are gonna talk seriously about a 4-day work week. People are gonna talk seriously about changing Fair Labor Standards Act in different ways to change the context in which work happens. And I think, those types of things are talking about different kinds of people. And so, we're gonna have to contend with a world in which, as I said, the jobs are changing, the number of jobs are changing, how much work is necessary is changing, and what income supports, this is really an incrementalist kind of approach and not UBI, federal jobs guarantee, any of that kind of stuff. That's not quite where I think the potential action is yet. Thank you.
Oh, is this? Oh. All right, I'm just gonna use my voice. Since you have data on both physical and mental disabilities, I was just wondering, how many low-income ABAWDs had, both? Or just what were the most common disabilities, physical and mental, if you
I
had
don't know
that?
the answer to either question,
Okay.
so I'm gonna write that down.
Oh, right,
That's a good
cool.
one. Very good one.
Thank you.
One question I had was, one issue you brought up was the fact that many of those who self-report these mental and physical disabilities, and they even I believe you said a quarter of them even say this has restricted me from work in some way. My understanding is that qualification is under people who are somewhat separated from the medical field themselves. Could we give that power to maybe doctors to have that distinction?
Right. So that the medical field is a part of this. You can there is expertise that is there. I think what's interesting is these state options. So if you're a SNAP, so SSI, SSDI, let's just set that aside for a second. If you're SNAP, you can still take a doctor's note. You can actually hire someone in-house to do disability adjudications as part of the intake process. You can keep cycling people off the ABAWD track if you want to, with wider parameters, and a lot of people don't do it, which is why we end up with an ABAWD population that has so many health issues, because we're not maximizing.
A final question to wrap things up, but if you could sort of wave a magic wand and address this issue today, are there examples that you think could be implemented at either a state level or a federal level that would really move the needle in a quick way?
Yeah, I think the earned income tax credit is a no-brainer. It's been it's come and go. They've done it temporarily. They've taken it back. It's been a huge part of, just sort of general, that is the one, along with continued Medicaid expansion, that continues to have the most policy legs. It's a matter of political will.
If you will, join me in thanking Lauren for this talk tonight.
Thanks, guys.
As always, if you have any lingering questions, you're more than welcome to come on up after we finish up just now. And want to thank Lauren, of course, for her time and expertise on this topic. We actually want to encourage you all to come out one more time this semester. This will be our fourth and final lecture in the Spring 2024 Brookings Scholar Lecture Series. 2 weeks from tonight, we'll be welcoming our colleague, Catherine Meyer, to Brookings Mountain West for the first time. She's associated with the Brown Center on Education Policy at Brookings. She'll be offering a conversation titled, Making College Worth It, Inequalities in Higher Education and How to Solve Them. So we'll hope you'll come out for that as well.
She's great. You should come.
Please do. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you again.